November 12, 2018. Trump moves massive arms supplies to U.S. from Europe at same time God enacts revenge on satanic Hollywood elites. A captivating new Security Council (SC) report circulating in the Kremlin today noting the unlikelihood of President Putin and President Trump being able to meet at this month's upcoming G20 summit in Argentina, states that Trump's less than 24-hour appearance at this summit of world leaders comes at the same time his military forces are making a massive drawdown of war machines and arms from their Marine Corps Prepositioning Program Norway MCPPN and transferring them to the United States, a move some Security Council members believe presages Trump declaring martial law in America as it nears civil war, whose spiritual component of was just witnessed after a raft of godless Hollywood elites who ripped into Trump for his correctly pointing out that California is responsible for their state's massive forest fires, most particularly because California refuses to cut down over 129 million dead trees in their forests, and in their doing so, earned God's wrath with his sending fierce winds to drive these fires straight into their hedonistic mansions, and among whose multi-million properties were left in smoldering ruins include anti-Trump singers Miley Cyrus and Neil Young, along with famous anti-Trump actors Gerald Butler and Robin Thicke. According to this report, one of the least reported, but most astounding statements President Trump has made in the past few weeks was that he was, indeed, fighting against evil and in preparation for his facing off against, was evidenced in late September when U.S. Marine forces began their largest deployment ever to the Nordic nation of Norway, whose top commander had previously warned that they should be prepared for the big-ass fight to come, but none of whom participated in the NATO war exercise Trident Juncture 2018, with their, instead, being used to remove and transfer to the United States massive amounts of stockpiles from Marine Corps Prepositioning Program Norway. To why President Trump needs this massive reinforcement of weapons, ammunition and war machines in the United States, this report notes, he unmistakably made clear last month by his declaring that he was a nationalist intent upon protecting his own nation, not others, and whose actions sparked terror throughout the entire European Union to such an extent, French President Emmanuel Macron issued a warning that Europeans cannot be protected from America without a true European army. Macron rebuking Trump by saying nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism. Macron further calling on Europe to abandon the US dollar, and French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire openly declaring that it was time for Europe to become an empire. As President Trump continues hammering the fragile fault lines making up the globalist world he so violently detests, and blames for the downfall of his nation's prosperity, this report details, many American experts are pointing to how little autonomy he has in foreign policy, thanks to the warmongering of the U.S. establishment that stands in stark opposition to Europeans knowing of his formidable executive powers of, notably in foreign policy, both of whom, though, have failed to read the brilliant book written by noted British historian Professor Christopher Clark titled The Sleepwalkers: How Europe Went to War in 1914, and that clearly shows how the French and British maneuvered poorly led Germany into the war. The Germans were petrified of being crushed between two hostile powers, France and Russia. The longer the Germans waited, the more the military odds turned against them. Tragically, Germany was then Europe's leader in social justice. Britain kept stirring the pot, determined to defeat commercial and colonial rival, Germany. The rush to war became a gigantic clockwork that no one could stop. All sides believed a war would be short and decisive. Over 100 million deaths in World War I and World War II proved how wrong they all were. As the world was in 1914, just prior to the outbreak of World War I, this report explains, so too is it again today, that sees our world's largest trading nations locked in an existential death struggle for survival and dominance, but that President Trump wants to remove the United States from participating in as he takes his nation off the great game-playing board to concentrate all of his efforts in protecting his own peoples. in trying to stop President Trump from retreating the United States into a nationalist-protected stronghold, though, this report continues, the overwhelming globalist factions in the United Nations are preparing to sign a treaty next month in Morocco declaring that the mass migration of peoples is a human right that no national border has a right to stop, as these globalists want a world where people can live in any nation they so choose. President Trump, however, this report notes, is preparing his nation to fight against the horrific consequences of this UN migration treaty by his deploying thousands of U.S. military forces to his nation's nearly full open southern border with Mexico, against which, last month alone, the globalists threw a staggering 23,121 illegal parents and children into, an over 400% increase of illegals just recorded a year ago, who will soon be joined by tens of thousands of other illegal migrants rushing towards in the U.S. southern border in caravans, many of whom are being protected in sanctuary cities where they're free to commit murders, and whose already overwhelming numbers of Mexico has just warned the United States is just the tip of iceberg of what is soon to come, most particularly because of the 3 million peoples who have fled the failed socialist state of Venezuela and are now surging towards the United States, too. With a giant Ponzi scheme known as the Chinese economy nearing collapse, as well as the Europeans becoming panicked as their economy stalls in its tracks, this report concludes, President Trump still presides over the most economically powerful nation in the world, but that now sees itself on a course to spend more on debt than defense, and whose rising interest costs could crowd out other government spending priorities and rattle markets, and is now seeing short-term rates hitting levels not seen since the global banking collapse of 2008, putting trillions of dollars at risk, with the American people still failing to realize that business projects that were barely economic at a 3% interest rate are completely uneconomic at 5%, and barely affordable mortgages at 5% won't be able to be paid at 7%, and whose only solution for is Trump solving the Triffin dilemma before a nuclear holocaust occurs.